Hello, CET Nation. My name is Kent Wilson, and I am once again excited to be teaching Broadway Workshop, although in a different format this time around. I'm glad that we still get to provide CET in this new way, even though coronavirus had other plans for the normal way that we do CET. We still get to have CET in this kind of new interaction, and it's actually really exciting because it provides different avenues for getting out material, and different people can participate in CET. Those who may not have been able to participate before can now enjoy part of what our program is all about, and so it's really exciting to be a part of this this organization at this time. Like I said, I am teaching Broadway Workshop, and this would be my second year teaching Broadway Workshop with CET. And what it is a class where we dissect and break down the different parts of a musical, and at the end of the 5 weeks of CET, you would have put together your own mini musical with different people in your groups, and we would have talked about how to incorporate a storyline, how to incorporate songs. We would have dissected different types of songs in musicals and how they relate to the storyline of a show, and what makes a good musical and what kind of necessarily doesn't work. So we're going to kind of cover all of that in little bits during this video series that we're all doing, okay? So first off, what is a musical? The easiest way to describe a musical would be a dramatic piece of work that heavily relies on dance and music to move the story forward. And also smaller components would be smaller, but just as important, trust me. It would be costuming, set design, light design, sound design. But at its core, in the book of a musical, in the meat and potatoes of a musical, the music and the dance drive the story forward. If you catch me looking over here, it's because I have notes that I'm going to read off of, okay? So the way I like to think about it, if we can condense everything in just to little tiny, maybe not tiny, but a very succinct explanation of musicals, there are kind of 7 points, with one of them having like 2 parts of it, so really 8 points to the process and the unfolding of a musical using songs. A lot of people like to write their songs first, and that drives their dialogue. A lot of people write the dialogue and it drives the songs. It could be whatever you want to do. This is totally your project. So those points. The first song in a musical is usually the opening, right? We're introduced to all the characters in the show. We're introduced to the central plot point, maybe. We're introduced to the central character. A good example of these songs are the entire 15-minute opening sequence from Into the Woods. Oh my God, you guys, from Legally Blonde. Shows like that. Belle, right, from Beauty and the Beast. They define the world, they define the story, and then it also kind of sets the tone and the mood for the show. Now, that's not always true, but in general, it sets the main feel of the show, right? So then we move to the second big song in a show, which is usually the catalyst song, where we're introduced to the central problem or the plot point in a show. So if we're going to keep going with the Legally Blonde analogy, the song Serious, where, you know, Warner kind of breaks up with Elle, that's the major plot point. Warner says he's going to go off to Harvard. Elle is not very happy about that. So we get that song. A goal of the protagonist is now formed. We now know what the protagonist is about and what their whole journey is going to be about. So then we move on to song number 3, which is what's called the point of no return. Okay, this is the song that really sets our main character off on their journey. And we can look at, again, if we're going to use Legally Blonde as an example, because it's one of my favorite shows of all time, the song What You Want, right? It's a 7-minute song. It's got a lot of dance. It's got a lot of story. It moves quick. These songs are really good at accelerating the story along, because now we get to see the thought process of the main character, when we get to see the wheels turning and how they're going to solve their problem. So here's point 4, and point 4 has 2. It's kind of like 4A and 4B, okay? So 4A, we get to the midpoint. Maybe the midpoint's beginning. Maybe we're leading into intermission. This section can kind of be pretty lengthy. It can kind of encompass a lot of songs. Legally Blonde, the midpoint, is probably that whole first time at Harvard where you get into Harvard Variations, into Blood in the Water, into Chip on Your Shoulder, into So Much Better, right? The midpoint can be kind of long. And it encompasses, again, a lot of songs that just continue to move the story along, and we find out different plot points. We find out different conflicts that the main character is going to have to face. It could be where your big I Want song comes in, right? If you look up musical theater history, a lot of musical theater historians will refer to the I Want song, right? It's the big belty song that everybody likes, everybody knows. It's the one that you leave the theater like, oh my gosh, this was amazing. And that's probably where also you're going to have an intermission if you're writing a full-length musical. And then after your intermission, we'd have our 4B, where we're still in our midpoint, right? Where we're still traveling through the journey with our main character. It doesn't have to be right after your intermission. It could be any length of time, but it's just something to help continue moving the story along. So then we get to point number 5, which is called the big gloom or the big sad. And here's where we kind of see things maybe crumbling and things falling apart. Maybe things not working out for our protagonist. And here, you know, in Legally Blonde, that's where we have the song Legally Blonde, right? The really, really sad but beautiful duet between Elle and Warner, where she realizes, you know, okay, well, maybe this isn't meant for me. And our protagonist is now second guessing their decisions and second guessing where they are, what their place is in life, which would lead to an action that would bring us to point number 6, which is our climax into the resolution. All right. So now we're at this point where we're going to resolve the end of the story. So this is where the big Legally Blonde remix comes in, right? Where all of a sudden Elle's encountered by all these people who are like, yo, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. All the support is happening. And she finds the strength to carry on. Then we would move on to what I call the warm fuzzies, or our new normal, which is point number 7, right? We wrap up the show. Everyone's kind of learned something, and it may not always necessarily be the warm fuzzies, even in a musical like Into the Woods, where the second act is all sad all the time, or a musical like Les Mis, where the second act is very, very sad. It wraps up, the story wraps up, right? And we're left with a positive message that we can take away, that we can apply to our lives. And that's the great thing about musical theater, is that there's always a message that you can apply to yourself, to better yourself. I've never walked out of a musical where I haven't found at least one piece of advice that I can carry with myself into my life. So, takeaway from this first video is, what are you going to write about? What's your story going to be about? There's so much that's gone on in the world in the last few weeks, not only with coronavirus, but as people are starting to come to terms with the national conversation regarding race relations and regarding our history and people wanting to make change. Musical theater has made change. There have been fantastic musicals that have really spurred good conversations around how to be better as people, how to love people better, how to treat people better, how to care for people better. So what's your story going to be? And again, we have musicals from all walks of life, all source material, from original shows like Next to Normal or Dear Evan Hansen, to shows that are based off of books like The Color Purple and The Secret Garden, to shows that are based off of movies like Billy Elliot and Anastasia, to shows that are based off of history like Hamilton and Assassins and Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, you could make a musical about anything, but it has to resonate with you. Your topic has to speak to you and has to leave you with a message of hope and of moving forward. So what is your message that you want to get to the world? What is the message you want to convey through song that you really think needs to be heard? Now, again, you don't have to have 7 songs in these shows. That's not it at all. You don't have to have 7 musicals or 7 musical numbers in your mini musical. But What do you want your message to be? Next week, we will talk about the types of songs. We'll go into more detail on the types of songs to maybe give you some ideas, but be thinking about that. What do you want your story to be? Who knows? But it's totally up to you. Have fun.